Put your right hand in the box.
Hello, beautiful people. I am Oliver Perrin for Semiogouge, and I'm here to tell you that we are at war. Right now, at this moment. Many of you might think you know what I'm talking about. Sadly, all but a few of you are wrong. Because to understand the war I'm talking about, we all need to think in new ways. We need to open our eyes and minds to an entirely different definition of warfare. Think of it as warfare without borders. Think of it as unrestricted warfare. And the dimension of it that should concern us, that does concern us, is anything and everything but the violent aspect of the war. Bear with me and I'll try to explain what I mean by this. Doubtless you've noticed that every aspect of life is now crawling with new rules related to what we're always supposed to do and what we're never, ever supposed to do. This signals the introduction of pressure, the imposition of force upon each of us individually and upon each of our respective nations. Total war is upon us. Listen to the heads that talk. Listen to the words that issue from the orifices. Gaze upon the blazing screens. See the sneers. Hear the obscenely backhanded, sneaky doublespeak. Recognize what you see before you. The cleaving and splintering of all of our institutions, addiction to paralyzing critical self-evaluation raised to the level of a masochistic fetish. We are all learning there's a point at which our endless cultural vivisection can't help but become an autopsy. We're encouraged to doubt ourselves. We're encouraged not to have children. We're told that the world is literally about to end. We're literally being told that the world is about to end. Children are being told this too, subverting and crippling entire generational cohorts within our nations. And children are being mobilized to shame us, as well as the always fashionable armies of beggars. But the opponents especially like to go after borders. They seek to erase all borders, and when borders go, order goes, along with hierarchy, property, and territory, qualities recognized to some extent by most animal life on Earth. But they think we're different, that we can be engineered into something without borders, without distinctions, without excellence. Look at the borders that have already disappeared. The border between man and woman, the border between non-sexual child and sexual adult, the border between genders, between singular and plural, him and her, they and them, between just and unjust, between right and wrong. But for our purposes, we're going to look more closely at the border between war and peace, and why we have to realize that it too has disappeared. In our Western cultures, we've long separated the domain of war from the domain of peace. In peacetime, we privilege the individual. We enjoy the protection of civil law. The emphasis is upon personal rights. In wartime, we're concerned with the collective. When faced with emergency circumstances, we establish martial law, at which point we all agree there's no more room for special snowflakes. Everyone wears a uniform. And if you refuse to march forward into battle when ordered to do so, your commanding officer can shoot you on the spot. Now, we did this for a reason. This cultural strategy enables us to make the most of focusing on the individual while still keeping the old system in reserve. The crisis system, the military system, is a kind of parallel form of social organization that's always available if shit goes sideways. Break glass in case of fire. But we don't declare war anymore. We no longer pull the alarms. Anyone else notice that? We've had any number of wars now that have never been declared by Congress. These days, there's no official marking of the transition. But that's just one aspect of removing borders. It goes further than erasing the borders associated with formal recognition of the state of war or the state of peace. Our kindly new forms of warfare are going on at all times, in all places, at all levels of society, across whatever demographic categories you care to consider. While there are no clouds of gun smoke, no rockets' red glare, no trumpets blare, no bombs bursting in air, still the shudder-shattering waves of progress are blowing everything to hell, leaving not one stone left standing upon another. It's raining straight up. But instead of recognizing the fabric is tearing and the seams are splitting, all by design, instead of admitting that we can't control our cities and borders, admitting that law no longer rules, we hire more police. And oddly enough, those police begin to be armed more and more like soldiers. Our circumstances come to feel more and more like an occupation. But we ourselves are the only enemy that's been identified. We're told we ourselves are the ones to blame for the steady stream of abuse spewed at us by most of Hollywood, the Academy, the media, and the rest of the everlasting gobslobbers of hate incorporated. The distinction between state of war and state of peace has been erased. Or to put it more simply, we're in a state of war, but the machinations of our opponents have suppressed all the signals, all the discourse that would come with openly declaring what we all know to be true, which is that we are under attack. The most important thing to realize, the critical thing to become aware of, is that our natural alarm system has had the wires cut. But the answer isn't to shift over into martial mode. The answer isn't to try to activate the old system, forcing a shift from civil to martial mechanisms. And the answer definitely isn't to foment violence. To do this would be to sacrifice ourselves yet again on the altar of false white stereotypes. Violence at scale is properly the domain of the state, properly the domain of security forces. As law-abiding citizens, our concern with violence should not extend beyond those circumstances in which self-defense is legally justified, as in the law, as in you're a fool if you break it, the kind of fool I want nothing to do with. So what do we do? How do we respond to this attack? Just sitting around and continuing to take it is clearly not an option. I suggest the answer is to call out the militia, in a manner of speaking, by explicitly spreading the word that we are no longer at peace, spreading the word that each of us bears responsibility for these circumstances, if not for creating them, then at a minimum for continuing to tolerate them. We cannot take action in the realm of violence, but we can take action, consistent and unrelenting action, in speaking out, in spreading the word, in lawfully organizing and protesting, in ridiculing those who seek to smother our pasts and move under cover of the present to steal our futures. So set objectives, establish responsibilities, establish milestones, cooperate, meet in real life, gather and discuss, test and refine arguments, work together remotely if you have to. If we spent half as much time working in groups using online collaborative project software as we do in YouTube chats or humping the inflatable doll known as Twitter, we'd all be a lot more effective. We have to begin to take organized, nonviolent action. We should recruit lawyers and subject matter experts, raise money, adapt and apply the best of the opponent's strategies. We should be bold. We should be cunning. We should do the unexpected. And we should always obey the law. We no longer enjoy the luxury of making war and then going home and returning to normal. Where is home, by the way? We are now at war at all times and in all places. It never turns off. It never goes away. The assaults continue always and everywhere, from our schools and hospitals to our banks and courthouses. We would be wise to fight for ourselves in everything we do. We would be wise to mobilize as a kind of global militia, wielding weaponized free speech and unbridled audacity, cooperating where and when it suits each of us and our respective national interests, because the goal is to win.